the consent agenda. So I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda, which includes the correspondence report.
So moved.
Second. Oh, we're just going. Oh my goodness.
Consent agenda approval. I made the motion.
I'm going out of order too. Was there any questions or discussion on that?
Just the edit.
Yeah,
Not on that.
I know I'm going out of
Oh,
order
okay.
on the agenda.
Personnel, if there's nothing from personnel, that's just it's on the agenda.
No.
So, any other discussion? No. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And I will apologize to Mr. Kitching because I went out of order here, but that was really quick. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Rodriguez to introduce Mr. Kitching.
Okay, so we have the pleasure of having Jeff Kitching here with us this evening to provide some updates about EdAdvance, our local regional educational service center, and the partnership they have with local districts, including Newtown. Just for all of you who might not know, Jeff is the executive director at EdAdvance and works with us on a variety of servicing and programming, including after-school programs. So thank you for being here.
It's absolutely my pleasure to be able to speak into the microphone for recording purposes. I'm sure you won't have any problem hearing me. Thank you very much, Lori, and thank you to the board for giving me a couple of minutes this evening. I know you have other business to do, and I'll be brief, but I do appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you a little bit about EdAdvance. As stated, I am Jeff Kitching. I've been the executive director at EdAdvance for almost 3 years now. I'm a former Connecticut superintendent of schools, and just thrilled to be making my way around the region over the last few months, trying to get in front of all the boards of education in our region, just to talk a little bit about our agency and where we're going and where we see our role moving forward to help school districts in the region. We have over a 50-year history at EdAdvance, along with the other 5 regional education service centers in Connecticut. Were created by the Connecticut legislature in 1966. We have served Litchfield County and Northern Fairfield County that entire time. We've changed our name a few times. We started out over 50 years ago as Rescue. We were Education Connection for a long time. Had an unfortunate association with the Get Your Degree in Your Pajamas, educationconnection.com people. We didn't want and like that association, so 3 years ago we changed our name to EdAdvance, because we really didn't have a choice. So we serve 29 school districts in that area, and they make up 32 different communities because there are a number of regional school districts there. We're governed by members of our local Board of Education. We're very pleased to have Michelle sits on our Board of Directors and has for a while. I'd love to have 29 Board of Director members, but not all 29 districts actually send a representative to serve on our board. Right now we have about 14 people assigned. We get 7 or 8 board members each meeting, but we are governed by your membership and run by the districts that we represent. We do a lot of things, and you know, I hear from people all the time. We see your vans all over the place. I was behind one of your vans the other day, more typically. But we are the primary adult ed provider for most of the districts in the region. We do summer school programs, we have driver's education programs, we do all the fingerprinting for school districts and many communities, municipalities in the area. We do food service for many school districts, especially the smaller districts in Litchfield County, where it's not really all that profitable for commercial entities. They don't go up and bid to do food service for 126 elementary kids in Barkhamsted, and if we didn't do it for Barkhamsted, nobody would. So it's not, it's not a profitable part of our organization, but it's something we need to do for school districts. So we're involved in many things, and as I point out to people, if school districts need it, we probably do it, or we can do it if they need us to. So I'm kind of going through the 3 different handouts. On the back of that first handout is some information about our finances. I'm proud of the fact that we are now up to 53% of our revenue coming from local school districts. As you know, as a Board of Education, state money, federal money has continued to dry up over time. There was a point as soon as 2 years ago where about 65 to 70% of our funding came from state contracts and grants. What this 53%, which will be over 60% when we develop, well, as we develop our budget for next year, what that represents is if we weren't providing quality programs and doing it for school districts at a cost-efficient and reasonable rate, that number wouldn't be going up. So the more that we can do for districts, and districts turn to us to provide services rather than commercial entities, I think we're doing a better job, and we're keeping our agency healthy and sustainable at the same time. The bottom chart I'm just as proud of. It shows that about 90%, and again, when we develop our budget for next year, that'll be up to about 92% of all of our revenue goes back to the school districts and the communities that we serve. For a nonprofit our size, to keep our overhead under 10% is really impressive. There are nonprofits, large nonprofits, that have 25 to 30% overheads. So we've done a lot of work to reduce wherever we can, but not eliminate programming. There is no direct funding stream from the state budget. There is no line item in the state budget for RESCs. There was. That's been gone for 12 or 15 years now. So any of the revenue that we do bring in, any of our funding, comes from either fee-for-services, and as you can see from the top grant, we do still get some contracts from the state and from the federal government. We have a federal contract to run Head Start in 3 or 4 communities. It's a federally funded preschool program. And there are a number of different things that the State Department of Education and other state departments simply should do on their own, but can't, and they contract to service centers, RESCs like ours. We're the second largest nonprofit employer in Litchfield County. We have over 650 employees at any given time. Seasonally, we'll cut as many as 900 paychecks. So it's a large entity. We service over 46,000 students. And most recently, we've made a real focused effort to invest in special education services and supports, regional special education services and supports for districts across the Ed Advance region. The horizontal sheet here that has the map and the culture connection customization is just some information about our focus internally and how we manage our agency. Our mission is over 50 years old also, and it's as relevant today as it was then. We exist simply to help school districts succeed, and we need to work collaboratively with school districts, and we need to maintain quality and excellence in the programs. I focus with our leadership all the time on redefining what a RESC can be. I spent my whole career in the Hartford area. We are unique among the 6 RESCs at Advance that we do not run magnet schools. So the other 5 RESCs have a much different relationship with the school districts in their regions because they compete for students, they compete for administrative and teacher talent, they compete for funding because RESC tuitions have gone up and up and up, and it's a different relationship. So I feel that Advance is unique, and I stress that with the administration in our agency, that we need to focus on that uniqueness and the fact that we don't have that adversarial relationship, and we really can be a regional education service center. And my 2 questions to them all the time are, if it's not us doing it, why aren't we doing it for school districts? And if it's not us doing it, who is doing it, so we can find out what we're doing wrong. We stick to this culture, connection, and customization. That's our vision. We've changed the culture in our agency over the last few years to get away from working in silos with 14 distinct departments. And when I arrived 3 years ago, most people in transportation didn't have any idea what anybody else in the agency did. And the same could be said for school age or after-school programs or adult ed. We've changed our focus to an understanding that, as a whole, we're much more effective, more efficient, bigger, better, faster than we would be as 14 separate parts. We monitor and review and analyze the connections we make with school districts every month. We provide data to each of the department heads and the administrators in our organization on how many emails and phone calls went out to every school district. So we know if our connections with Newtown drop off at any point, that everybody knows I'm going to know why. If we had 600 different contact points with Newtown in November, how come it's down to 200 in February? Why aren't we staying connected with our districts? And we have to be ready to customize. Our region is diverse. The needs of Newtown are different than the needs of Colebrook, and those are different than the needs of Torrington and Danbury and so on. And even the districts that might be similar, their needs might differ. So we can't have a one-size-fits-all product regardless of the service or the support we're providing. We've got to go to districts and ask them to tell us exactly what they need, and we've got to try to make that work. So I also included some information about the Regional Education Service Centers, the RESCs. We have a Connecticut RESC Alliance. We work together on a number of statewide initiatives. And the most, I think, evident part of our work is our lobbying on behalf of school districts as an alliance. My colleagues and I spend a lot of time in Hartford during the sessions trying to get legislators to understand the things that will have negative or positive impacts on school districts, and hopefully give up on the negative ones and support the positive ones. We spent a lot of time talking about regionalization and what I talked about tonight, and Lori's been very involved with a group of superintendents in Western Connecticut. I try to explain to legislators all the time what I've tried over the last 3 months to describe what that Lori and her colleagues have done in this region to work together on meaningful, naturally progressing, organic ideas around regional efficiencies, not forced consolidation, and telling Newtown, well, maybe you got to take 2 other districts that have less than 2,000 students and form one large district, or so on. The northwest corner of the districts, where you'd have to get 10 or 12 districts together before you'd even come close to 2,000 students. So we're trying to get legislators to understand that boards of education and superintendents, they do this work. They try to find efficiencies, try to find more cost-effective ways. You just need to let it come from the districts and from the people. So that's it. I apologize for speaking quickly, but this is about my 15th one of these, so I'm getting better and better at it as I go. And I know you have other work to do tonight, so I'm not going to take up any more time. I'd be happy to answer questions about anything else.
Thank you so much. I know that it's good for many of us to, I know your face, but we talk about you at our meetings from time to time, and it's good for all of us to know the face that goes with the name. So does anybody have any questions? Thank you so much for...
It was my pleasure. Thank you for giving me the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Like I said, I know you're busy. So, Lori, thank you so much. And if any questions ever come up, both Lori and Michelle will have the whole place.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you. All right, so that bring us to our public participation. I don't think I'll open up public participation. I won't go through reading the statement we have. You can read it for yourself if you'd like to participate, but if anybody's up for public participation, I would invite you to come up now. Oh, all right, sensing none, we'll close out public participation and move on to reports, starting off with the chair report. So we had the request for a discussion regarding high school class testing strategies, and we'll bring that up at our next meet. That'll be on the agenda for next week. We have a meeting in a week from now, so put that on your calendar because of the spring break. So we'll take that discussion up next week. Legislative Council will be voting on the budgets tomorrow night. And I just wanted to thank Ron and Lori and all the Board of Ed members who have been at all of the meetings. And it seems like each year there's more meetings, more questions, and more fun to be had with this whole process. And I do appreciate everybody who's been involved involved in the entire process, and hopefully tomorrow night will come out good. The CIP items that will be on the budget referendum, there are 2 of them, and Ron wrote, I believe it was Ron, who put together the text that goes for the explanatory text that goes at the voting booths that's available for anybody who's voting. And it also goes out, I think, in mailers if people have absentee ballots, they'll get that information. So that's gone to the town, and I think the lawyer needs to review that before it gets approved. And then we have the Communications Committee's newsletter, which came out today, which is very impressive. Thank you so much for working on that. That was very nicely done, and I hope everybody is able to take a look at that because it has some really good information. And then April 23rd, hopefully, we'll have the referendum and we'll be done with one, I hope. And that ends my report. Are there any questions? So we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Dr. Koo. I wanted to start this evening by publicly thanking all of the staff and administration in Newtown for their support of our family-friendly Friday. It was obviously needed, and I want to thank the parents for sending pictures of their relaxing family weekend activities. Every now and then, I think it's okay to just focus on nothing else but family and friends. And we were happy as a school that we could partner with families to make that the most important thing above everything else for one single weekend. So I really, truly thank you for the support. We will be sending out communication to staff and families as we get closer to our annual Panorama School Climate Survey. This is something that we do annually, as well as the social emotional learning section for students, which was piloted last year, as you know. This provides us with information from all stakeholders regarding the academic and social learning environment and how this is actually perceived by staff, students, and parents across the entire Newtown landscape. We continue to use this data, and it does become the focus of both our teacher and our administrator goals as well. As was mentioned in the Newtown BOE, the most recent data from highway traffic safety noted that more than 3,450 fatalities and more than 390,000 people are injured in motor vehicle crashes, mainly due to the use of technology. Dr. Neil Chowdhury, resident and traffic safety scientist at PRG in Monroe, noted that drivers who text or surf the internet on smartphones are 2 to 8 times more likely to be involved in a crash, and those who simply talk and drive increase their risk of up to 4 times. So Dr. Chowdhury's work in response to increased injuries at bus stops prompted a collaborative effort among Newtown, Monroe, and Bethel superintendents and districts, which included monitoring distracted driving at bus stops and identifying ways to better safeguard our students moving forward. So we were really proud to be a part of that study, and I will be sending out more details as that unfolds. And finally, you have a handout this evening outlining just a few of the building and site maintenance projects that will be taking place over the April break. Gino's team is fantastic, and this will also include the air conditioning, the ductless splits going in at Holly in the multi-purpose room. I won't go through all of that. You can certainly read and ask me any questions, but those again are just the projects that will take place over the April break. And that's all I have this evening.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have any questions? All right. That will bring us to committee reports. Were there any policy, which happened the day after our last meeting?
Yes, and the next one is tomorrow. So we continue to move through very quickly through the 5,000 series. We are actually finishing up the 5,000 series soon, which is very exciting, and we'll be bringing more policies to you to review at our next meeting, I believe, as well as the policies that we're looking to have hopefully your approval on this evening. So we're talking about things like freedom of speech and student government and gaming and human dignity. So it's gotten to a really interesting section of the policy side. So we'll have more to report to you on that very soon.
Good. Anyone else? Communications committee sent out a newsletter.
We didn't meet them. Well, we reported on it.
I'm sorry, I was a little confused. Curriculum and instruction did meet and reviewed curriculum for math grades 2 and 3 and recommended both of those curricula to come to the full board for approval. They're not new curriculum, they really are putting into writing what has been practiced and really what I see is really great curriculum in math that's developed in the past 10 years or so. Anybody else on committees? Questions regarding committees? Okay, so we'll move on to our Newtown High School student representative reports. Oh, I'm
I don't know if
sorry.
we could report on just school visits.
Yeah, school visits.
Sorry, I was able to, is this on? Okay. I was able to visit the middle school after our last meeting and was able to, Principal Unhorn and Assistant Principal Ross and Dr. Redrig accompanied me. We walked around and visited a classroom for each subject area. It was great to see the students very engaged in learning. We visited a language arts program or a classroom where the students were reading and discussing a novel that they were reading. We got to visit one of my favorite spaces, the tech ed room. Mr. Upley was in there, and it's great to see the students working on their problem-solving skills and developing those. And so I was very happy to have the opportunity to visit and walk around the old stomping grounds.
Great, thank you. Did Finance Committee meet? There-
We did. What are the notes? So we talked about the food service contract and extending the food service contract, which will be brought to you. We also talked about, the different options for adding in air conditioning and ventilation to the 2 schools, the 3 schools, sorry. What's that? Hallway, yeah, the middle school and Middlegate. So we'll be bringing more information to you about those projects coming up, but we got some information about the cost of those projects. We had some representatives there who shared with us what their thinking was with regard to developing those 3 projects.
That was good for on the fly.
I know.
All right, so any questions on those or any more liaison activities or anything I'm missing? Yes, Mr. Cruz.
Last Friday, Head of Meadow had its first movie night with their brand new sound system. So they were very happy that they now have a sound system that works so they can once again do movie nights. It was a lot of fun.
That's good. All right, I think we can move on to high school student reports now. Yeah. Okay, we'll move on to the high school student reports.
This week marks the start of field trips across the school as 9 of our students are on a trip in India for the NICE program and are meeting with kids from our sister schools while exploring the area. Additionally, the AP Lit classes took a trip to Yale to watch a play of one of the Shakespeare books that they read in class. Students in Spanish classes had an in-school field trip where they made food and artwork to celebrate the different Spanish-speaking cultures, and the French classes also had a day celebrating Mardi Gras with decorations and food. Seniors are finishing up the cumulative effort of their capstone projects, and they presented today on their different topics. This past week in Junior Council Workshop, seniors came in to give advice on the college process as juniors start getting ready to begin their applications. Lastly, the high school will host many regional colleges and representatives from schools tomorrow in the college fair as
Saturday, the boys volleyball team beat Darien, who was formerly the #1 team in the state, 3-2 after being down 2-0. And then last night they beat Darien 3-0, or Denver, sorry, to move to 2-0 as they look to have another successful season. Yesterday, both softball and baseball won their games, with softball beating Darien 21-2, and baseball won 5-0 against New Milford, as their junior pitcher, Josh Taylor, was 1 out away from having a complete game, no-hitter. Boys tennis and girls lacrosse are both playing Joe Barlow tonight, and Unified Track had their informational meeting yesterday for their partners, so their season's getting underway. Middle school students who are looking to play sports next year at the high school have an informational meeting in the auditorium with Mr. Memley, and finally Winter Garden percussion finish off the season with competitions in Milwaukee this past week.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions, comments? High school graduation forms. Set the date tonight. You want to hang around to find out what the date of graduation is? We do have some. We have some new policies coming up. Do you want to hang around for those?
So excited.
Yes. All right, thank you so much. All right, so that brings us to old business. We have discussion and possible action on the 2019-20 school calendar.
Yeah, so I already shared the details of the calendar at the previous meeting, but just to give you another quick overview, we added 3 early release on the first 3 days of school. As I mentioned, 3 hours to allow for additional professional development for our teachers. This seemed to be a theme when I spoke to teacher forum, teacher climate and culture, as well as the administrators and the administrative team, as well as the PTA presidents. I did pass all of this by parents as well. This has been problematic, I think, for teachers and administrators for a while, as I mentioned, especially when they need to meet, not only in their own buildings, but across buildings throughout the district. The other, which was a suggestion after our last board meeting, and a change, was to move the conference days in the fall for the elementary to 3-hour early dismissal, since we moved from having 4 days for conferencing to 3. This will provide enough time for teachers to schedule all the parent meetings that they have, but it will only impact 3 days for instruction rather than the 4. We also increased the early dismissal times only on the staff development to 3 hours. Again, as I explained last week, the time for teachers to actually have, meet with each other and have that real consistent time to actually focus on some of the work. It's very challenging in 2 hours, so this will help a great deal. Other than that, the general feel, no matter who I spoke with, was to continue the same approach to the calendar. This year wasn't really a good example of using or not using the April date, but by adding that one additional PD for teachers was significant, as we haven't had that in the past, and we get to have that now. But other than that, that's what we'd like to propose as our calendar moving forward.
Thank you. Well, let's get the motion on the table. So I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve the 2019-20 school calendar.
So moved.
Second.
So Mr. Crusoe makes the motion, Sarah Winstead seconds. Does anybody have any questions or comments regarding? Yes, Mr. Cole.
I was just curious if the full day in April, does that sort of coincide with sort of like a reflection on how the year's going and then sort of planning for next year? Or like why, just sort of the thought behind taking the full day in April as opposed to maybe some other month?
The reason for that is because we do have the November date, so we just start kicking off the year. That's actually why we wanted to go with the 3 days at the beginning of the year, even though they're not full. Even that time that they've not had before will really kind of kick off the year with staff development. Then we get to November and we normally plan either a district-wide, this year it was a district-wide staff development. But April's a good time because it's both a reflection and a look ahead.
Anyone else? Questions, comments? Mr. DeLeo?
I was just wondering if there's a way that we could format it, and I know this is last minute, Dr. Rodriguez, but for example, what Andy was talking about the third being off, it's marked with a star, and then other days that are early dismissals are also marked with stars, and I was wondering if we could
No,
do
we actually did that on purpose. This was, we felt a much cleaner representation than we've had in the past. So we've had shaded areas to show that all schools are closed for staff and students. We use the asterisk so that if you recall, and this actually a lot of this came from the PTA presidents, and I understand why, because it was very difficult to read prior to this. If you recall, a lot of the information that's under the calendars happened to be at the bottom of the calendar, so you had to look. And I think it was dashes that we used with no numbers. So we felt that this was a much cleaner representation, easier to read.
So you cleared. So the PTA likes the way it looks. The parents with the PTA.
Actually, that's where a lot of this came from. And the administrative team as well went over it, as did the teachers. But it's, we felt much better than it was before. There were numbers missing and dashes and asterisks in some places and not others, so we think we've cleaned it up quite a bit.
I do see what you mean, just looking at it from a...
Or you might think the third is a school day.
Right, but, I mean,
But you
I
have to
could
read
go
the
and
asterisk.
color it in myself, I suppose, if I really needed to have that. Anybody else? Questions, comments? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes unanimously. And that brings us to the second read on our policies and possible action. Did you receive any comments in the meantime? No. So, shall we move all the policies at once?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring to the board's attention, I know that when we spoke at the last meeting, we thought perhaps we needed to adjust the graduation requirements since they have changed a number of times. So we did make that adjustment to the policy 5123 so that it was reflective of the current graduation requirements that we passed recently.
So, would anybody like to make a motion that the Board of Education approve the policies? I'm just going to read the numbers. 5121.3, 5122, 5122.3, 5123, and 5123.3.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Busan makes the motion, Ms. Herman Slate seconds. Any questions or discussion on policies?
Very basic question. I was just curious of why the last one, it says participation in parentheses. It seems like that's what the whole policy is about. I'm just curious why it's in parentheses. That's just
I'm not really sure, that's just the way we got it from Kate. And I think, a lot of the policies are named and numbered based on a standard set of requirements, so.
because just when you sort of think graduation ceremony, it sort of seems like that's the topic of what the ceremony is going to be all about, not really necessarily what the, policy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know off the top of my head, but there may be another policy about graduation ceremonies.
So that makes sense.
I can't say for sure. But
I mean, this is outlining, the requirements for being able to participate.
Right, so that's
It's
why.
not where it's going to be located or how many seats you have to have.
And that's
I
exactly
think
my,
that's the reason.
that's my point, and that's my question, sort of like should it be in parentheses or maybe not, or is it clear? I guess, I don't know, is it really?
I think we just followed suit with what they had, but.
Yeah, and that's typically, some of our other policies will have the main topic and then, just the subtopic in parentheses. It seems to be something that we frequently do. I don't really agree or disagree with it. I think it's just the way it is.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? So motion passes unanimously. And that brings us to new business. Our first read on the public speaking curriculum. Dr. Rodriguez, would you like to introduce?
So we have the first read of public speaking, which was revised in concept-based format. Again, deepening the level of students' depth of understanding, and I think better preparing them for becoming strong, confident public speakers across diverse audiences, delivery models, and using rhetorical devices. This evening we have English teacher and department chair Abby Marks. So welcome.
Thank you for so good evening, and thank you for having me here to speak about the revision to the public speaking curriculum. I also wanted to acknowledge my colleague Kathy Swift, who is present and was one of the 2 teachers that worked together to revise this curriculum and currently teaches it to a group of seniors. So thank you, Kathy, for being here in support of this. What's truly wonderful about this particular curriculum is that Kathy is one of our concept-based curriculum trainers. So when she and her colleague Jacob Thomas worked to revise this, they did a really excellent job putting it into the concept-based format. Public speaking is one of the 11 semester electives that's offered to our seniors as part of their way of acquiring their English credit for their senior year. This year we have 89 students that have taken or are currently enrolled in this course. The curriculum, again, put into concept-based format is structured into 4 units. I was just going to give a very brief overview of these units with the goal of, as Dr. Rodriguez said, making our students confident and comfortable public speaking in a variety of situations and a variety of formats. So they begin the course with the units called First Things First, but really in looking at what public speaking is all about, what makes a good speech. And they do that by studying qualities of a variety of different speeches, and the first assignment that they do together is looking at what they call a manuscript speech. So taking a speech that someone has already given, evaluating it, cutting it down to 5 minutes, and then delivering that speech in front of the class. So it gets their feet wet in actually giving public speaking by using someone else's words that they have tailored. From that introduction, they go on to the second unit, which is focused on narrative and telling your own story in a speech. This is where in the fall, our students have the opportunity to also work on developing their college essays with their teachers. But the focus here is on giving personal speeches, so telling your own story. They do a lot of different exercises, including some that involve humor, and also practice giving short extemporaneous speeches. So again, getting them comfortable with how they would speak about themselves or tell their own stories. From there, in the third unit, the focus turns to structure and particularly appealing to audiences depending on what your focus is. They study and write and deliver a graduation speech. They do how-to speeches, and also the more expository or informational speech, which they practice not only writing and giving a speech, but using a PowerPoint as an aid. So rather than reading off slides, we want them to feel that they could be comfortable actually teaching a topic with using that visual aid. And then all of this builds up for students to their final project, which is we call it a mini TED Talk, or an 8 to 10 minute speech that's prepared and delivered without notes. We typically do it in our lecture hall. The students can pick any topic that they want, but their goal is to persuade their audience to agree with them on some kind of topic. So again, this would be building up on all the skills that they've worked all semester, whether that was using notes, then note cards, and then actually speaking with confidence and poise about a topic that's meaningful to them. Over the course of the semester, students would write and deliver 8 to 10 formal speeches themselves, in addition to a lot of other small activities that might include everything from, practicing tone of voice by, reciting song lyrics with a particular emotion as part of the sort of, ice breaking and practicing how to change your tone of voice, to again having to speak extemporaneously for 2 minutes about a topic. Students report and teachers report that the atmosphere in the classroom really tends to build over the course of the semester, and students really encourage each other. And even for students who might be a little afraid of public speaking or trepidatious at the beginning of the semester, by the end they're really supportive of each other. We also feel that it's a great step for students. All students give a presentation at the end of their junior year with their Proteus project presentation, which is the culminating project of the junior year. This is a great next step to prepare them for the variety of situations that they might encounter both in their collegiate or professional lives, where they would be required to offer some public comments. So it's been a very successful course for us so far. I'm really thrilled with how this curriculum has come together. We have 3 different teachers who taught the course this semester. This year that has provided them with a strong foundation. I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have about the curriculum or their experience.
Are there any questions? Mr. Clark.
I don't have a question, but my son is in it.
Oh,
and
wonderful.
he talks about it all the time. So,
That's great.
I think it's a tremendous course, and I'm all for it. I think it's. I somehow wish maybe it was labeled something different, because I wonder if kids get spooked by public speaking. That I don't know. There could be a different name, or maybe the seniors that are taking and talk to juniors or people that are signing up saying, hey, because I think it's a great thing that's going to be helping them later in life. I guess my overall bigger point. I just think it's great. And I'm glad it's being forward.
Thank you. We do, when we quote unquote sell our courses to our juniors when they're going through the course selection process, which actually happens, in January, February of their junior year, we do really try to talk to students, in depth about all the different options. We also, this year, Team Bank teachers met with the guidance counselors to talk about the value, or talk more specifically about some of the choices. So hopefully we can work with guidance to promote it as well. But you're not the only one we've heard positive things from parents who find the class valuable. So glad that your son is enjoying it.
Very much.
That's great.
Are there any other questions? Comments? No?
I just want to say what an incredible job. Just take a look at the actual units of study. Fabulous.
They did a great job.
Yeah.
Not surprising at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, the curriculum that comes through from the English department is just fabulous. Yeah, thank you. So, sensing no more questions, I think if anybody does have any questions between now and our next meeting, which is a week from now, if you could just get them to me as soon as possible, since it's sort of a shorter time period, so that we can get them answered before the next meeting. That would be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, so that brings us to the discussion and possible action on the award for the Sandy Lightning Protection System. Mr. Spire is here to give us the rundown on how this bid came about and was resolved.
Good evening, how are you? So on February 15th, 2019, the RFP for the Sandy Hook Lightning Protection Project was published. On February 25th, we had a site walkthrough attended by 5 different vendors, 2 of which submitted bids for this project. The bidding companies were Associated Lightning Rod out of Millerton, New York, a bid of $130,972, and NNS Electric out of Stratford, Connecticut, for a bid amount of $149,150. Pardon me. After review of the bids, it was determined that Associated Lightning Rod was not going to be able to meet their bid price. This was gone over by myself, and Gino Fiella and Ron Bathrick, our design engineer. Their bid was hence eliminated from consideration. The bid from N&S Electric brought us over budget on the project. So after some negotiations with N&S Electric, we got them to lower their bid price to $138,000, bringing the project within bid scope, within project budget. The N&S Electric was actually one of the companies that our design engineer worked with to kind of grasp the scope of the project. So my recommendation is hiring of N&S Electric to install the Sandy Hook lightning protection project for a cost of $138,000.
So before we get into questions and discussion, why don't we entertain a motion that the Board of Education award the Sandy Hook Lightning Protection System project to N&S Electric for the amount of $138,000 as bid on February 15th, 2019.
So moved.
Mr. Poussin makes the motion, Mr. Wilson seconds. I don't know if did you have anything you wanted to add, Ron? Mr. Binkowski.
I just wanted to point out that with this renegotiated price, we are within the overall budget for what we requested of the Board of Finance to be used from the non-lapsing account. There is engineering that's in addition to this, and project review by the engineer. So in total, with this revised price, we should have about $4,000 to the good for all three of those projects. The ductless splits for Holly and the middle school and this project. So it's within budget. Good to go.
Any questions? Yeah, Mr. Delia?
Can you elaborate on what happened with Associated Lightning Rod? Can you give me I just want to understand how they came in with a bid and then.
Sure. So they came in with a bid. It looked a legitimate bid when they came with their electrician to do a secondary walkthrough. The electrician then stated to them that he could not do the job for the bid price that he bid to them. They were subcontracts, so that N&S Electric will be the general contractor on this bid. They will work with the subcontractor that does the actual lightning protection. So there's two aspects of the project. There's the lightning protection, and then there's surge suppression to all of the cameras and the gates and everything in the school. So N&S Electric will do the surge suppression, but will act as general contractor and sub out the lightning protection part. Associated Lightning Rod was doing it the opposite way, and their electrician said that he just said he couldn't do the price that he quoted on that.
Is it typical to have a bunch of people walk a bid and then only a couple present a bid?
Yeah, so what happened in this Associated Lightning Rod was the only, they bid on N&S Electric bid with another company that walked the project as well. The lightning protection company walked the project, so N&S and Northeast Lightning Company was going to sub out for N&S. They just combined the bid together. So some people it's just beyond their scope. We had a lot of lightning protection people there, and two electricians companies. So I think some of the lightning people thought maybe it was beyond their scope with the surge suppression that we were doing as well.
Anyone else? Questions? No? Okay. So it's all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for staying with us for the evening.
Thank you.
That'll bring us to the discussion of possible action on the letter to the Connecticut Legislature regarding teacher pension. So I will entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve sending a letter to the Connecticut Legislature
So moved.
Second.
Teresa makes the motion, Ms. seconds the motion. I assume everybody's had a chance to read the letter. Are there any comments or revisions or anything that anybody would like to change? So this is the governor's budget bill that's currently, I think, in the appropriations committee. So that's where this would be sent. It would end up being posted along with other public comments on this bill. So if there are no changes to this, what we would do is print this up on Newtown letterhead and send it off the next day or two. Mr. Clerk?
Not really a question, but do you think it's more powerful if we all, everyone signs it individually on the letter as opposed to just one signature on it?
It absolutely would be more powerful, I think, personally. And we could do that if everybody, I could, make sure there's a clean copy in the office, in the Board of Ed offices, and then if everybody would agree to stop by there. Yeah, but I'm not gonna have this printed out at first thing in the morning. So that, if that's something you'd like to do, I'd be happy to include each person's name on here so there's room for everybody's signature. Is that something you're interested in doing? Okay.
I don't want to speak for everyone. I'm sorry. I don't want to speak for everyone else, but yes.
Okay. Kind of looking for consensus here. Is that okay? Everyone?
When do you need this?
Yeah, I'll definitely take the draft watermark off of the letter before you sign it.
If you sent it, if this is a Word document, then I can take care of it. I can take care of it.
So,
Because I'm gonna put it on letterhead anyway. So I can get a draft off and prepare it
okay.
tomorrow, this way you can consent.
Okay. And then add everybody's name
I
at
will.
the bottom.
You
Is
want,
there-
the title, secretary,
Yeah. I think that's a really good suggestion. That it is more powerful. All right, so.
I don't want to be Daniel, I don't want to be Daniel.
Pardon me?
Daniel.
Sure.
Thank you.
Everyone, you want Andrew, everyone?
Is everybody good with their
Can I
name
change
as it
my name?
appears?
I'm sorry?
She wants princess.
Do you want, how do you want that?
Well, my name is Debbie, so that's my actual name.
Okay, not Deborah.
Not my name.
Okay.
Thank you.
The only one that might be difficult is John Voros, but
Sorry.
we can probably get his signature. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
When do you want to mail it?
Well, as soon as
Do you
possible.
want mailed or emailed?
We will send it electronically to the appropriations committee email address.
Do you have it? We can do that, and we can send them a copy too, if you like, whatever you want to do.
I'm just wondering how late you were there, so I just wanted to try to meet.
So I'll wait for you,
Okay.
no problem.
This is tomorrow?
If you can get there tomorrow, that would be great.
Okay.
Otherwise, we'll start making phone calls to get everybody there. All right, so,
It was my idea, so I better be the first to do it, so, you know.
all right, so sensing there's no other changes other than adding everybody's name and title to the end of the letter. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. And that brings us to action regarding non-renewals. I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve the 2018, 2019 list of non-renewals. to make a motion to?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Cruzan makes the motion, Ms. Aaron states second, so, is there, do we need any background on that? Any discussion, questions? All right, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So that passes unanimously. And we're on to the moving up ceremony and the high school graduation. I will entertain a motion that the Board of Education set the 2019 Newtown High School graduation date for June 11th, 2019 at 4 p.m. at the O'Neill Center, and the Newtown Middle School moving up ceremony for June 12th, 2019, which will be held at 4:30 p.m. and 7:15 p.m. in the Newtown High School gymnasium.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Cruson makes the motion, Ms. Herman states seconds. Are there any questions, comments? No. Do you have background or anything you'd like to add to this?
No, we're just, I feel like there should be a drum roll.
I
Parents
know.
wait for this all throughout the whole year. No, these were good dates. That Tuesday is a really good date, so we were really lucky to get it. It falls right in line with the end of the school year. So for high school, it will be perfect because we can ask them back the day after, like we did last year, to do their walkthroughs of the elementary and down there cap and gown and have lunch on us. It really was a special day for them, and I think all the staff as well. So we're really excited. It was really a perfect lineup of dates that we were lucky to have. I do want to just add, well, why don't you finish that? You're done, right?
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that we'd like to ask that the last 3 days of school, the early dismissal, 2-hour early dismissals, 2 of those days are obviously moving up and graduation, so we've done that in the past, and the last day of school as well.
Yeah, I'm seeing, all right, so the motion that we have is just regarding the dates and the location of the
We
graduation.
normally just discuss,
Okay.
yeah, it's not an approval really needed.
And so then, I'm sorry, I was distracted by the fact that that wasn't part of the motion. So the last 3 days of school would be half days? Is that what?
2 hour.
2 hour
Early
early
dismissal.
release. Okay. Anybody? Can I ask about the auditorium at the high school? Was there a point at which when the class sizes would be small enough that we could have
Yes,
graduation there?
That's what I think we talked about at a previous
Yeah.
meeting, that it's just too close right now to call. But we know in the future it'll fit. Right now, it's just they're gonna squeak by if we use that, unfortunately.
All right, anybody else? Mr. Clark?
Having my first senior, so how does it work with the finals and everything like that?
So seniors normally take finals earlier, and that's so that it lines up in terms of graduation on the last day of school.
So they'll be probably taking it the week prior or whatever.
I think it's the week prior. Is it still the week prior, Mr. Sienna?
And I guess notification will be going out to parents.
Yes, you will, normally all the senior parents, they will send out a letter just telling them the dates of graduation and as well as the final exams. And the last day of school is normally for makeups, and that's just makeup for all high school students.
Okay. So, any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Abstentions? So, motion passes unanimously. Graduation has been set. All right, so that brings us to the minutes of March 19th. So I will entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve the minutes of March 19th, 2019.
So moved.
Second. Mr. Cruson makes the motion, Ms. Cruz seconds. Are there any? Yes, Mr. Cruson.
noticed this at the last minute. It says I was
That you were
absent.
I know.
It says I was absent, and then I made one of the first motions.
Wow, that's
I
amazing.
took care of that. I saw that when I was making copies, and I said, oh my God, I forgot to do that. So it's taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Sorry
so
about that.
with Dan Cruson being present, are there any other comments or questions? All right, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Mr. Clark abstains, otherwise passes. And that brings us to our second public participation. Are there any members of the public who would like to address the board during the second public participation? And seeing none, I will close out public participation and just note that I did not make an effort to go through and find our strategic plan items in this agenda, but anybody is welcome to go through and notice those when they come up. So, given that, I will entertain a motion that we adjourn.
So moved.